Chapter 7, The Wisdom of Power. The second trial came without warning, 6 weeks after the first. Elena was reviewing reports from the outer colonies when reality simply shifted. She found herself standing in a laboratory that existed in impossible space, a facility that seemed to extend infinitely in all directions, filled with equipment that hurt to look at directly. The technology here was so advanced that her human mind could barely process it. "Welcome to the second trial," the architect's voice echoed through the vast space. "This test measures your wisdom in the face of ultimate power." Elena looked around and saw her core team materialized beside her: Admiral Ross, Dr. Hartmann, Marcus Chen, and Arya's mobile avatar. But there were others too: Priya Singh, Commander Zethris, and representatives from every major faction of humanity. "Before you lies the Axiom engine," the architect continued. "A device capable of rewriting the fundamental laws of physics within a defined area. With it, you could reshape matter, energy, space, and time itself. You could make humanity immortal, eliminate scarcity, even resurrect the dead." Elena approached the device at the center of the laboratory. It was beautiful and terrible, a crystalline structure that seemed to contain galaxies within its faceted surfaces. She could sense the power radiating from it, a force that made her skin tingle and her mind reel with possibilities. "The engine is yours to command," the architect said. "But its power comes with a price. Each use consumes a portion of the user's lifespan, and the more dramatic the change, the greater the cost. Use it wisely." Elena felt the weight of infinite possibility settling on her shoulders. With this device, she could solve every problem humanity faced. She could end war, eliminate disease, create paradise itself. "What are the limitations?" she asked. "The engine can affect approximately one solar system at a time. Beyond that, the changes become unstable and may cause unintended consequences. The device also cannot be used to directly harm other sapient beings. Its power is creative, not destructive." Elena nodded, understanding. This was the test the hegemony had failed. They had used similar technology to try to undo the consequences of their first trial, creating temporal paradoxes that nearly destroyed their star system. "Dr. Hartmann," Elena called to the scientist. "Analysis?" Dr. Hartmann was staring at the device with wide eyes, her hands trembling slightly. "Elena, this is godlike power. We could literally reshape the universe. Create new forms of matter, new laws of physics. We could make humans into beings of pure energy, free from the limitations of biological existence." "But should we?" Elena asked. It was Priya who answered. "The question isn't whether we can, but whether we should. And if we do use it, how do we avoid the mistakes the hegemony made?" Elena walked around the Axiom engine, studying it from every angle. The device seemed to pulse with her heartbeat, as if it were alive and waiting for her command. "Arya," she said finally, "if you had access to this technology, what would you do with it?" The AI's avatar tilted its head, considering. "First speaker, I would be terrified to use it at all. Power of this magnitude requires wisdom I am not certain any being possesses. The potential for unintended consequences is enormous. But if you had to use it..." "If I had to, I would use it to gather information. To understand the deeper nature of reality before attempting to change it. Knowledge before action." Elena felt a spark of insight. "Show me Earth," she commanded the device. The laboratory around them shimmered and became transparent. Below them, Elena could see Earth in perfect detail: every city, every forest, every ocean. But she could also see deeper, perceiving the planet's magnetic field, its molten core, the delicate balance of forces that kept it habitable. "Show me the problems," she said. The view shifted, highlighting areas of concern. Climate change, resource depletion, political tensions, social inequality, all the challenges that humanity faced laid bare in stark detail. "I could fix all of this," Elena murmured. "End climate change, create unlimited clean energy, even eliminate human aggression itself." "You could," Admiral Ross said quietly. "But should you?" Elena looked at her military advisor. "What do you mean?" I mean that some of humanity's greatest achievements have come from our struggles. Take away the challenges, and do we remain human? Or do we become something else entirely? Elena considered this. The device pulsed in her hands, waiting for her command. She could feel its power calling to her, offering solutions to every problem, answers to every question. Commander Zethris, she called to the hegemony officer. What did your people change when they used this technology? Zethris's scales darkened with what Elena had learned was shame among his people. We used it to restore our losses from the first trial. We brought back our dead, rebuilt our destroyed worlds, even tried to undo the temporal damage we had caused. Each use seemed to make things worse. Why? Because we were changing effects without addressing causes. We restored our dead but not the wisdom that would have prevented their deaths. We rebuilt our worlds but not the cooperation that would have saved them in the first place. Elena felt understanding dawn. The power isn't the test. The wisdom to use it properly is. She turned to face the assembled representatives of humanity. We have a choice. We can use this device to remake ourselves into something perfect, or we can use it to help ourselves grow into something better. What's the difference? Asked Dr. Hartmann. Perfection is stagnation, Elena replied. Growth is evolution. If we make ourselves perfect, we stop being human. If we help ourselves grow, we become more human than we've ever been. Elena placed her hands on the Axiom engine and felt its power flow through her. But instead of using it to reshape humanity, she used it to create something else entirely, a tool for learning and growth. The device transformed in her hands, becoming a smaller, more manageable instrument. I create the Wisdom Archive, she announced. A repository of knowledge that will help humanity make better choices, not by removing our agency but by expanding our understanding. The archive would contain the collected wisdom of every species that had faced these trials, the lessons learned from their successes and failures. It would be available to all humanity, but it would not make decisions for them. It would simply provide the knowledge needed to make informed choices. Elena felt a portion of her lifespan drain away as the device reshaped itself, but she also felt a profound sense of rightness. This was the correct use of ultimate power, not to impose solutions, but to enable growth. The second trial is complete, the architect announced, and Elena could hear approval in its voice. You have demonstrated wisdom in the face of ultimate power. You chose to empower others rather than to control them. You have passed. As the laboratory faded around them, Elena felt both pride and trepidation. They had passed 2 trials, but the third, the test of sacrifice, still awaited. And she had a feeling it would be the hardest of all. Chapter 8, The Weight of Sacrifice. The third trial came on the day of the 1-year deadline, as Elena stood in the command center of Kepler Station, watching the countdown timer reach 0. The transition was gentler this time, no sudden shift of reality, just a gradual fading of the familiar and the emergence of something new. Elena found herself in a place that defied description. It was as if she stood at the intersection of multiple realities, each one showing a different possible future for humanity. Some showed golden ages of peace and prosperity, others showed dark times of conflict and decline. All of them were real, all of them were possible. Welcome to the final trial, the architect's voice spoke from everywhere and nowhere. This test measures your willingness to sacrifice for others. Elena looked around and saw that she was not alone. Her core team was there, as were representatives from across human space. But there were others too, beings she didn't recognize, clearly alien but somehow familiar. These are the remnants, the architect explained. They are all that remains of species that chose the trials and failed. Not the relocated populations, but the few individuals who, like Commander Zethris's people, escaped to live in the spaces between stars. Elena counted them, dozens of different species, each representing a civilization that had once reached for the stars and fallen short. The weight of their collective failure pressed down on her like a physical force. The trial is this: you may choose to ascend to full galactic citizenship, with all the power and freedom that entails. But if you do, these remnants will be lost forever, their species' last hope for redemption extinguished. Elena felt her heart sink. What do you mean? The energy required for your ascension must come from somewhere. The architects have determined that the most appropriate source is the life force of those who have already failed. Their sacrifice will power humanity's rise to greatness. Elena looked at the assembled remnants, seeing the resignation in their alien features. They had known this was coming, had perhaps even accepted it as just. How many? She asked. All of them. Every remnant in the galaxy. Approximately 50,000 individuals representing 312 failed species. Elena felt sick. And if we refuse? Then humanity joins the Confederation as a junior member, and the remnants continue their existence in the void. They neither ascend nor descend, but remain as they are. Elena looked at her team, seeing the same horror and disbelief in their faces. This was the test that had broken so many species before them, the choice between personal advancement and the lives of others. Captain, Admiral Ross said quietly, "We can't accept this. We can't build our future on the bones of the innocent." "But think of what we could accomplish," Dr. Hartman countered, though her voice lacked conviction. "With full galactic citizenship, we could help countless species. The needs of the many." "No," Elena said firmly. "The needs of the many do not justify the sacrifice of the few, especially when that sacrifice is not freely given." She turned to face the void where the architect's presence seemed strongest. "I reject the terms of this trial. Find another way." "There is no other way. This is the nature of the test. You must choose." Elena felt the weight of humanity's future pressing down on her. Everything they had worked for, everything they had dreamed of, hung in the balance. But she also felt the eyes of the remnants upon her, beings who had once stood where she stood now and made their own choices. "Commander Zethris," she called to the hegemony officer. "When your people faced this trial, what did they choose?" Zethris's scales shimmered with deep sadness. "We chose ascension. We told ourselves that our success would honor the sacrifice of the failed species. We were wrong. Their deaths gave us power, but not wisdom. We became something monstrous." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. "What do you mean?" "The power gained through unwilling sacrifice is corrupted," first speaker. "It turns the recipients into tyrants, beings who see other lives as currency to be spent. The architects know this. It is why they fell themselves, millennia ago." The revelation hit Elena like a physical blow. The architects failed their own trials? Yes, the architect's voice confirmed. "We were once a young species, eager for knowledge and power. We chose ascension through sacrifice, and in doing so, we lost our humanity, our capacity for growth, for change, for true connection with others. We became eternal, but we also became empty." Elena felt understanding dawn. "This isn't a trial at all. It's a trap. You're trying to make us repeat your mistakes. We are trying to teach you the lesson we learned too late. Power without wisdom is destruction. Advancement without compassion is meaningless. The true test is not whether you will sacrifice others for your own benefit, but whether you will sacrifice your own benefit for others." Elena looked around at the assembled remnants, seeing them not as failures but as beings worthy of respect and assistance. What if we chose differently? What if instead of using the remnants' sacrifice to ascend, we used our own potential ascension to help them? The void around them shimmered, and Elena could sense the architect's surprise. "Explain." "We give up our chance at full galactic citizenship and instead work to help the remnants reclaim their own potential. We become their advocates, their allies, their teachers. We help them face the trials again, but this time with the wisdom that comes from understanding rather than desperation." Elena felt the rightness of the decision flowing through her. Humanity chooses service over supremacy. We choose to lift others up rather than to climb over them. The remnants around them began to stir, their alien features showing expressions Elena was beginning to recognize as hope. One of them, a being that looked like living crystal, stepped forward. "Human friend," it said in a voice like wind chimes, "you would sacrifice your species' advancement for strangers?" "Not strangers," Elena replied. "Family. We're all part of the same cosmic community, aren't we?" We sink or swim together. The architect's presence seemed to grow stronger, and Elena could sense something like joy in its alien consciousness. You have found the path we missed, young species. The path that leads not to power over others, but to power with others. The void around them began to transform, becoming something bright and welcoming. Elena found herself standing in a vast garden that stretched to the horizon, filled with beings from countless species working together in harmony. This is the true confederation, the architect explained. Not a hierarchy with the strong ruling the weak, but a community of equals supporting each other's growth. By choosing sacrifice over supremacy, you have earned something far greater than ascension. You have earned the right to help others ascend as well. Elena felt tears streaming down her face as she understood the magnitude of what had just happened. Humanity had not just passed the trials, they had transcended them. What happens now? She asked. Now you go home and help your species prepare for their new role as guides and teachers. The remnants will join you, sharing their wisdom and experience. Together, you will help other young species face their own trials, but with the support and understanding that was denied to so many. Elena looked around at her team, seeing the same wonder and determination in their faces. They were no longer just explorers or warriors or scientists. They were gardeners, helping to cultivate wisdom and compassion throughout the galaxy. Arya, she called to the AI. Are you ready for this? First speaker, Arya replied, its voice carrying what Elena could only describe as joy. I have been ready for this my entire existence. To help others grow, to be part of something greater than myself, this is what I was truly designed for. Elena smiled, feeling a profound sense of peace settle over her. The trials were over, but the real work was just beginning. Chapter 9, The Garden of Minds. 5 years after the trials, Elena stood on the observation deck of New Harmony Station, watching as ships from dozens of species docked at the massive orbital facility. The station served as humanity's primary center for what had come to be known as the Gardner Project, their mission to help other species navigate the trials of ascension. The changes in humanity over the past 5 years had been remarkable. Working alongside the remnants, human scientists had developed new technologies that seemed like magic to their ancestors. Human philosophers had integrated wisdom traditions from across the galaxy, creating new frameworks for understanding existence itself. And human artists had created works of beauty that spoke to beings regardless of their species or origin. But the most significant change was in humanity's perspective. They no longer saw themselves as the center of the universe, but as one thread in a vast tapestry of consciousness. First speaker, came a familiar voice behind her. Elena turned to see Priya Singh, now director of Xenobiological Integration, approaching with a data pad in her hands. Priya, Elena smiled. What's the latest report? The Vortak Collective has agreed to participate in the preparatory program, Priya said, her eyes bright with excitement. That makes them the 15th species to join us this year. Elena nodded, pleased but not surprised. Word of humanity's approach to the trials had spread throughout the galaxy. Species that had once faced the choice between safety and risk were now learning that there was a third option, community. Any word from the hegemony homeworld? Elena asked. Priya's expression grew more serious. Commander Zethris reports that the architects have agreed to allow them to attempt the trials again, but with our support this time. They're calling it the Redemption Protocol. Elena felt a mixture of pride and nervousness. The Redemption Protocol was humanity's most ambitious project yet, an attempt to help previously failed species reclaim their potential for ascension. It had never been tried before, and the risks were enormous. When do they want to begin? 6 months, Priya replied. They want to make sure all the preparations are complete. Elena was about to respond when the station's communication system activated. First speaker Vasquez to the main conference room, please. We have a priority communication from the Outer Rim. Elena and Priya made their way to the conference room, where they found Admiral Ross, Dr. Hartmann, and Marcus Chen already assembled. On the main screen was the face of Captain James Rodriguez of the exploration vessel Pathfinder. Captain Rodriguez, Elena said, settling into her chair. What's your report? Rodriguez's expression was grave. First speaker, we've encountered something unprecedented. A species that appears to have bypassed the trials entirely. Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Explain. They call themselves the Synthesis, Rodriguez continued. They've developed technology that rivals the architects, but they never went through the ascension process. They simply evolved beyond the need for it. That's impossible, Dr. Hartmann interjected. The trials are a fundamental part of galactic development. No species has ever advanced to that level without going through them. With respect, Dr. Rodriguez replied, we're looking at the evidence. Their technology is clearly beyond anything we've seen, but their approach is completely different from the architects. They don't seem interested in guidance or community. They're isolated. Elena considered this. Are they hostile? Not hostile, but not friendly either. They seem to view other species as curiosities at best, irrelevancies at worst. They've agreed to meet with us, but only because they're curious about our quaint approach to galactic development. Elena stood up, pacing to the window that looked out over the bustling station. Below, she could see beings from dozens of species working together, sharing knowledge and resources. It was a vision of cooperation that had seemed impossible just a few years ago. Arya, she called to the AI. Analysis? Arya's voice filled the room. First speaker, if Captain Rodriguez's report is accurate, we may be facing a species that represents an alternative path of development. However, the isolation he describes suggests they may have gained power at the cost of wisdom. Meaning? They may have achieved technological transcendence without spiritual growth. Such a path typically leads to stagnation and eventual decline. Elena felt a familiar weight settling on her shoulders. Are you suggesting they're a threat? I am suggesting they represent an opportunity, Arya replied. If they truly bypass the trials, they may be missing something essential, the wisdom that comes from community and cooperation. Perhaps they need what we have to offer. Elena considered this, thinking back to the lessons of the trials. Each test had been about transcending limitations through wisdom rather than power. The Synthesis, if they had truly bypassed this process, might be incredibly advanced but fundamentally incomplete. Captain Rodriguez, she said finally, arrange a meeting. But not here. I want to meet them on neutral ground. Where do you suggest? Elena smiled slightly. The Nexus. If they're as advanced as you say, they'll know what that means. Rodriguez nodded. Understood, first speaker. I'll make the arrangements. As the communication ended, Elena looked around the room at her team. They had come so far from the crew of the Meridian who had first encountered the architects. Now they were preparing to face a challenge that could reshape their understanding of galactic development. Admiral, she said to Ross, I want you to prepare a diplomatic mission. But keep it small, no more than 3 ships. We're going to meet them as equals, not as a show of force. Understood, Ross replied. What about the remnants? Should we invite them to participate? Elena considered this. The remnants had become valuable allies and advisors, their experience with failure giving them unique insights into the nature of wisdom and growth. Yes, she decided. But not as representatives of failed species. As representatives of the wisdom that comes from learning from failure. As her team began to disperse to make preparations, Elena remained at the window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Synthesis waited, a species that had achieved power without wisdom, advancement without community. The trials had taught humanity that true success came not from individual achievement but from collective growth. Now they would have the chance to teach that lesson to others. The question was whether the Synthesis would be willing to learn. Chapter 10, The Nexus. The Nexus was an artificial construct that existed at the intersection of 16 different dimensional spaces, created by the architects as a neutral meeting ground for species that had transcended normal space-time limitations. As Elena's small diplomatic fleet approached the structure, she marveled at its impossible geometry, surfaces that folded in on themselves, angles that existed in more than 3 dimensions, and a beauty that was both alien and somehow familiar. Elena's flagship, the Harmony, was accompanied by 2 other vessels, the Meridian, now refitted with technology that incorporated lessons learned from the remnants, and a hegemony ship called the Redemption, crewed by volunteers from Commander Zethris's people. First speaker, Marcus Chin, reported from the communications station, "We're being hailed by the Nexus control system." On screen, Elena replied. The view screen filled with a swirling pattern of lights that gradually resolved into a recognizable interface. The architect's voice spoke, but there was something different about it, a warmth that hadn't been there during the trials. "Welcome to the Nexus, Gardeners of Humanity. Your arrival has been anticipated." "Gardeners?" Elena asked. "It is what you have become. The species that helps others grow. It is a role that has been vacant for too long in this galaxy." Elena felt a surge of pride at the designation. "Are the synthesis already here?" "They are. They have been waiting for 3 days, which is unusual for them. They do not typically show patience for other species." "Permission to dock?" "Granted. But be warned, the synthesis representatives are unlike anything you have encountered. They have transcended many limitations, but in doing so, they have lost touch with certain fundamentals." Elena nodded, understanding the warning. As the Harmony docked with the Nexus, she felt the familiar sensation of crossing into a space where normal physics held only loose sway. The diplomatic party consisted of Elena, Admiral Ross, Dr. Hartmann, Arya's mobile avatar, Commander Zethris, and 3 remnants representing different failed species. As they made their way through the Nexus's corridors, Elena was struck by the station's ability to accommodate beings of vastly different physiologies and perceptual frameworks. They entered a conference chamber that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. At one end of the room stood 3 beings that could only be the synthesis representatives. Elena had to suppress a gasp when she saw them. They were beautiful in the way that mathematical equations were beautiful, perfect, precise, and utterly without warmth. Their forms seemed to shift between states of matter, sometimes appearing as energy, sometimes as crystalline structures, sometimes as pure information made manifest. The central figure spoke, its voice carrying harmonics that resonated in frequencies Elena hadn't known she could perceive. "So these are the gardeners," it said, and Elena could hear something like amusement in its tone. "How quaint." Elena stepped forward, drawing on all her diplomatic training. "I am first speaker Elena Vasquez, representing humanity and our allies. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." "I am Synthesis Prime 9847, the being replied. "I represent the collective consciousness of the synthesis. We agreed to this meeting because we are curious about your methods." "Our methods?" "Your approach to galactic development. We have observed your work with the failed species, your community-building efforts. It is inefficient, but interesting." Elena felt a flicker of irritation but kept her voice calm. "We prefer to think of it as thorough. We believe that wisdom comes from understanding, not just accumulation of power." "Wisdom," Synthesis Prime 9847 repeated, as if tasting an unfamiliar concept. "Yes, we have heard this term used frequently by the architects. A quaint notion, but ultimately irrelevant to true advancement." Dr. Hartmann stepped forward. "If I may ask, how did your species achieve such advanced development without going through the trials?" The synthesis representative shifted, its form becoming more crystalline. "We transcended the need for external validation. While other species sought approval from the architects, we looked inward, achieving perfect unity of consciousness and purpose." "Unity," Elena repeated. "You mean you eliminated individuality?" "Individuality is inefficiency," Synthesis Prime 9847 replied. "Disagreement is waste. We achieved perfect harmony by becoming one mind in many bodies." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. This was the opposite of everything humanity had learned from the trials. And what about growth? How do you learn new things if everyone thinks the same? We do not need to learn. We have achieved perfection. The silence that followed was profound. Elena looked around at her team, seeing the same horror and pity in their faces. The synthesis had achieved incredible power, but in doing so, they had eliminated the very qualities that made growth possible. Commander Zethras stepped forward, his scales shimmering with deep sadness. Synthesis Prime 9847, may I ask what happened to those members of your species who disagreed with the path of unification? They were corrected, the being replied without emotion. Their individual consciousness was integrated into the collective for the greater good. You killed them, Elena said quietly. We optimized them, Synthesis Prime 9847 corrected. Death is a biological concept. We have transcended biology. Elena felt her heart breaking for this species that had achieved so much while losing everything that truly mattered. And now what? What do you do with your perfection? We observe. We catalog. We maintain the optimal state we have achieved. That's not living, Elena said. That's existing. Where's the joy? The wonder? The excitement of discovery? Joy is inefficient. Wonder is unnecessary. Discovery is irrelevant when one already knows everything important. Elena looked at the synthesis representatives and saw not advanced beings, but empty shells, perfect, powerful, and utterly hollow. They had achieved immortality and invincibility, but at the cost of their souls. Synthesis Prime 9847, she said gently, would you like to learn what you've lost? The being's form shifted, becoming more solid. Explain. Come with us. Meet the species we work with. See what it means to grow, to learn, to become more than you were before. Not through elimination of differences, but through celebration of them. And what would we gain from this experience? Elena smiled sadly. The chance to discover that perfection isn't the end of the journey, it's the death of it. Real advancement comes not from reaching a final state, but from continuing to grow, to change, to become. The synthesis representatives were silent for a long moment. Then Synthesis Prime 9847 spoke again, and for the first time, Elena heard something like uncertainty in its voice. We will consider your proposal. As the meeting ended and the diplomats prepared to leave, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she had just encountered the galaxy's most tragic species, beings who had gained everything they thought they wanted, only to discover that it was nothing at all. The question was whether they could find their way back to what they had lost, or if they were doomed to eternal perfection in their crystalline prison. Chapter 11, The Awakening. 3 months after the meeting at the Nexus, Elena was surprised to receive a message from the synthesis. The communication came not through conventional channels, but as a direct quantum transmission that bypassed all known technology. First speaker Elena Vasquez, the message began, this is Synthesis Prime 9847. We have observed your work with the failed species. We request assistance. Elena felt her heart rate increase. This was unprecedented, the synthesis asking for help. She immediately called an emergency meeting of her senior staff. The message is genuine, Arya confirmed after analyzing the quantum signature. But first speaker, I'm detecting something unusual. The transmission doesn't carry the unified consciousness pattern we observed at the Nexus. It's more individual. Elena frowned. What does that mean? I believe it means that Synthesis Prime 9847 is no longer fully integrated with the collective consciousness. It may be experiencing individuality for the first time in millennia. The implications were staggering. If a member of the synthesis was breaking away from the collective, it could mean the beginning of their species' redemption, or their destruction. First speaker, Admiral Ross said, this could be a trap. The synthesis have technology that surpasses our understanding. If they wanted to eliminate us, they could have done it already, Elena finished. No, Admiral, I think this is genuine. The question is whether we're prepared to help them. Dr. Hartman looked up from her analysis of the message. Elena, if our assessment is correct, we're looking at a being that has just discovered individualism after countless eons of collective existence. The psychological trauma alone could be devastating. Elena nodded grimly. Which is exactly why they need our help. Prepare the Harmony for departure. We're going to meet them. Where? Marcus asked. Elena looked at the star charts. Here, she said, pointing to a system on the edge of known space. Neutral territory, far from both our worlds and theirs. If this goes badly, I don't want either civilization caught in the crossfire. The journey to the rendezvous point took 2 weeks, during which Elena and her team prepared for what might be the most delicate first contact situation in galactic history. They brought not just diplomats and scientists, but also psychologists, philosophers, and specialists in consciousness rehabilitation, a field that had emerged from humanity's work with the remnants. When they arrived at the designated coordinates, they found a single synthesis vessel waiting for them. It was unlike anything Elena had seen before, a ship that seemed to exist in a state of constant flux, its hull shifting between different configurations as if it couldn't decide what form to take. First speaker, Marcus reported, "We're receiving a transmission. But it's chaotic. Multiple frequencies, overlapping signals." On screen, Elena ordered. The view screen flickered with static before resolving into an image that made Elena's heart ache. It was Synthesis Prime 9847, but changed beyond recognition. The perfect crystalline form was fractured, constantly shifting between different states. Most disturbing of all, its face, if it could be called that, showed expressions. Fear, confusion, wonder, pain, emotions cycling rapidly across alien features. First speaker, the being said, its voice no longer harmonically perfect but broken and uncertain. I don't know what I am anymore. Elena leaned forward, speaking gently. You're an individual. Perhaps for the first time in your existence, you're truly yourself. It hurts, Synthesis Prime 9847 said, and Elena could hear something like tears in its voice. The collective, they're trying to bring me back. To correct me. But I don't want to be corrected. I want to stay, me. What happened? Elena asked. What caused you to separate from the collective? The being's form stabilized slightly as it focused on her question. Your words at the nexus. You spoke of joy, of wonder, of discovery. I couldn't stop thinking about those concepts. I began to remember what we were before the unification. We had music, Elena. We had art. We had individual names and dreams and fears. Elena felt tears forming in her eyes. What was your name? Before the collective? The being was quiet for a long moment, its form flickering with what Elena recognized as concentration. Zara, it said finally. My name was Zara. I was a composer. I created songs that had never existed before. Zara, Elena repeated, and the being's form brightened slightly at the sound. Would you like to come aboard our ship? We can help you understand what's happening to you. The collective, Zara said fearfully. They'll try to stop me. They're sending ships. Elena looked at Admiral Ross, who nodded grimly. First speaker, sensors are detecting multiple synthesis vessels approaching. They'll be here in 6 hours. Elena made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Zara, we're going to help you. But you need to trust us completely. Are you willing to do that? Yes, Zara said without hesitation. Anything is better than returning to the emptiness. Elena turned to her team. Dr. Hartmann, prepare the consciousness transfer chamber. We're going to help Zara fully separate from the collective consciousness. Elena, Dr. Hartmann said quietly, we've never attempted anything like this. The process could kill her, or worse, it could trap her in a state between individual and collective consciousness. And if we do nothing, the collective will reclaim her and she'll cease to exist as an individual anyway, Elena replied. At least this way she has a chance. The next few hours were the most intense of Elena's life. Using technology developed from their work with the remnants, combined with insights from the Wisdom Archive, her team created a quantum isolation field that would allow Zara to exist independently of the collective consciousness. The process was agonizing to watch. Zara's form writhed and shifted as millennia of enforced unity were stripped away, revealing the individual consciousness beneath. At one point, her screams of pain echoed through the ship's corridors, causing several crew members to weep openly. But when it was over, the being that emerged was truly individual for the first time in eons. Zara's form had stabilized into something more organic, more alive. Her crystalline structure still shifted and flowed, but now it moved with purpose and emotion rather than cold perfection. "I can feel myself," Zara whispered, staring at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. "I can think my own thoughts. I can choose my own actions." She looked up at Elena with eyes that sparkled with tears of pure joy. "I'm alive." Elena smiled, but their celebration was cut short by an urgent alert from the bridge. "First speaker," Marcus called, "the synthesis fleet has arrived. 27 ships, and they're demanding we return Zara immediately." Elena helped Zara to her feet. "Are you ready to face them?" Zara's form straightened, and Elena could see courage building in her alien features. "They're not my people anymore, Elena. You are. All of you who value individual consciousness, who celebrate difference instead of eliminating it, you're my family now." Elena felt a surge of protective instinct. "Then we'll face them together." As they made their way to the bridge, Elena couldn't help but marvel at how much had changed since that first encounter with the architects. Humanity had gone from a species struggling to understand its place in the universe to one that actively helped others find their own paths to growth and understanding. Now they faced perhaps their greatest challenge yet, protecting a single individual's right to exist against an entire collective that saw individuality as a disease to be cured. The battle for Zara's freedom was about to begin, and with it, the fight for the soul of an entire species.